Today I'm going to be talking about transitioning from 1 to 2 children and the challenges, everything that we went through, how it was for us, and also share some tips for before the baby gets here, the newborn days and after the newborn days, because it changes so quickly and every step is just as important as the previous step. So I thought I would share with you our experience and how it all worked out for us. And if you're new to my channel, my name is Aziz. I have a little girl called Isabella who's 8 months old and a little boy called James who is 2.5 years old. My 2 little ones are 21 months apart, so that's a very small age gap, and it has its own challenges, but it also has its very specific joys and pleasures. And if you enjoy these kinds of mummy videos, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. There's a button down there that says subscribe, and then there's a little bell next to it so that you can enable notifications, and then you get notified whenever there's a new video from me. So now let's get straight into the video. I'm going to start in chronological order. So when I got pregnant, when I found out I was having baby number 2, and the things that I did, the emotions that I felt. And we were actually planning to have baby number 2, so it wasn't a surprise to us, and we were very happy. But those first few months of pregnancy where you have morning sickness, the tiredness, the everything, like the hell of the first trimester, were incredibly hard. In both my pregnancies I struggled with a lot of morning sickness, but particularly in the second one because I already had one little one to look after. Most days I had to just get on with it, and it was very difficult, but you get through it. And if you're in this moment right now where you're pregnant and you're feeling morning sickness and you have a toddler to look after, just know it will pass. And I know you're feeling horrible. I was you a few months ago, but it goes, and you're stronger than you think. You'll get through it. You get to the end of the day, you don't know how you did it, but you did. So that was my sort of main tip, is just keep going. It's hard, it is hard. Complain if you want to complain, moan if you want to moan. It is hard, but it does go away. It passes and it gets easier. After the first trimester was over, I got more and more excited about having a baby in the family, and I started thinking about what I had to do to prepare James, make sure that he knew what was going on and what to do. The challenge that I had was because James was still relatively young, he had only just turned 1 when I got pregnant. All the advice that I saw online was for older babies and older children, like 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds who can understand a lot more than a 1-year-old. And I just felt like nothing was working for me, and it made me feel like I was doing something wrong. In actual fact, if you have a very young child and you're pregnant, just know that your very young child is not going to understand it all fully until they're a bit older. Most of the times it seems like it goes over their head and they're not even listening to you, which was really frustrating because I had all these things prepared, like books and things that I wanted him to pay attention and see, you know, books about new babies and having a sister, because we found out we were having a girl, so, you know, we told him that he was having a baby sister, and it didn't really mean anything to him back then, but it's still important to do those things because everything is getting stored in their brain. They hear everything. Children, they're like sponges and they soak up all the information, and everything that you're telling them is being stored. He might not understand it, but he was storing that information. So I still think it was important. In hindsight, I just wouldn't have felt so frustrated thinking that this is not working. Another thing that I did to prepare James was make sure that he was always interested in the baby bump, because it's very difficult for them to understand that a baby is coming and that there's a baby in mummy's tummy when they're that young. And I made sure that his relationship, the thing for him was the baby bump. And so every morning he'd give mummy a kiss, daddy a kiss, and baby bump. Baby sister in mummy's tummy, but we'd call it baby bump. And he'd always point to my tummy and say, "Where's baby?" And he'd point to mummy's tummy because he'd know that baby was in there. And so it was something physical for him to focus on, and just make sure you build that relationship. It also helps because toddlers are very active and they don't know their strength, and sometimes he'd be a bit rough, sort of like bashing, and I, you know, have to say to him, look after baby bump, it's very precious, and he would know that that part of mummy's body was more fragile than other parts of my body. So it took a while getting him used to it, but he finally did, and he became a lot gentler and less rough, sort of like playing with me, because he was used to me playing with him and not complaining about anything, and then suddenly mummy's got this big belly, and this big belly stops her from doing everything that I want her to do. So yeah, make sure your child has a nice sort of affectionate relationship with your baby bump. Something else that I found really helpful for whilst I was pregnant and before the baby arrived was to get my rest. And I had to force myself to do that because I knew that I wasn't going to get enough rest once I had 2 children in the house, and I forced myself to get my rest. I'm glad I did that, and I recommend that you do that too if you're pregnant. Make your rest a priority because you're not going to get much of it once you have a newborn baby. Another thing we found useful with James was focusing on songs. James learns a lot from music, and he's a very musical child. He's just very tuned into music, and like I said, he learns a lot from music. And so I thought that maybe what I was lacking in getting him to understand the concept in the books, I could make up for it in music. And I found some really good videos on YouTube that had songs that involved an older child and a baby in the family, and he was just fascinated watching the interactions and what the older child does with the baby. I'll leave a link to it below, and there's some very nice and gentle and easy to understand songs, nothing too difficult, and it really did keep him gripped. And up to this day he remembers the songs and he sings to it, so I found that really helpful for him. And my last advice for before the baby gets here, for preparing your older child to a new baby in the family, is to not overwhelm them. You want to prepare them, but you don't want to make them feel like it's all a bit too much and they don't want it or they don't like it. Take their lead, and if you're finding that they're becoming a bit uninterested, just leave it and talk about it a bit later, but try not to overwhelm them too much and to, you know, put too much emphasis on the baby and say, you know, you're gonna get a baby and it's gonna be amazing and all of this and that. Instead, you could try to focus on things that he will be able to do once the baby is here. So you'll be able to help mummy change baby's nappy, and you'll be able to teach your baby how to play with your cars, just to make them a little bit more excited about this baby that everybody seems to be talking about all of a sudden, but not overwhelming them with too much information or too much about the baby. Now for some tips for the newborn days. I found them particularly challenging because I thought I was prepared, and I'm a person who likes to read a lot, research a lot, and I thought I've done enough research. I know it's going to be hard and I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna tackle it like this and that, and if I feel stressed I'll do it. When it happens, you're like, what on earth? What am I doing? Why did I choose to have 2 young kids? Or why did I choose to have a second baby? One was hard enough. So I found it particularly challenging, and I felt like I was losing my mind for a lot of the time, but I didn't lose my mind. I got through it, and 8 months later I'm here. So you can get through it as well. What I found really challenging, first thing, was knowing that one person, my firstborn, who I spent all my time and my attention and I'd never spent a day apart from, was suddenly spending a lot of time with other people, learning a lot of stuff from other people that wasn't me, and that I felt like he was missing me, that I wasn't there for him, that he just wasn't getting from other people what he needed to get from me. And I know it sounds all irrational now that I'm past that stage, but at the time that's what I was feeling. I just felt lots of confusing emotion at that time, and I'd love to know if any of you felt like me, so leave a comment below and tell me, because I've never come across anyone who had those feelings like me of, you know, most people say, oh, you know, I was happy that my family and friends were taking my toddler out so that I could spend some time bonding with the baby, and no one ever talks about their own feelings about not being with their child, their firstborn, who, you know, a few days ago was your life and your whole world, and all of a sudden they are kind of being shared around people. So obviously that's very irrational, like I said, but it is real, and it's a feeling that I felt. But knowing what I know now, I appreciate that he was building these relationships with grandparents, aunties, uncles, his own father, and these relationships are really strong now because of that period and because he spent so much time with other people and without me having to be there all the time. And I really appreciate it now. I really appreciate the fact that, you know, he had that opportunity to forge relationships by himself without me being the mediator, and yeah, it made him feel a little bit more confident in other people's companies. And so because of that, and if you're feeling like I felt, my first tip is to get family and friends to help with the baby so you can spend more time with your toddler. And I feel like that's a really good balance, because obviously you're already spending a lot of time with the baby, feeding and changing and putting down for naps and things like that. So you get to spend quality time with your toddler or your older child, whilst other people get to know your baby as well. And you kind of get a break sometimes, because once you've been with the baby for so long, you just want hands-free and you just want to have 5 minutes to do something that's not involving holding a baby. I don't mean that in a negative way, and if you're a mum, you know exactly what I mean about wanting to have like baby free time so that you can do other things. Even if it's doing that with your older child, sometimes you just need that freedom. So yeah, that would be my first tip, is to, when people come over, they just immediately assume that you want help entertaining your toddler so that you can be with the baby. And sometimes I preferred if they helped me with the baby so that I could entertain my toddler myself. My second tip is to keep your older child's life consistent and keep them in the same routine to avoid as much disruption as possible, because their worlds have been turned upside down with the arrival of this baby, who is now the center of attention a lot of the time when people come over, and it takes a lot of mummy's time. And so keep their lives as consistent as possible. And if you can't keep the routine exactly the same, just try and keep certain things the same. So the things that you do first thing in the morning, the things that you do at bedtime, or introduce something that you do at the same time every single day. I think it made James feel like his life was still important and he still had a role in the family. And sometimes the baby also had to wait, because it wasn't just him being told in a moment. Sometimes there were things that he needed to do and the baby had to wait. So it brought a little bit of balance to the family. The third thing is to get them to help you. And again, if you have a very young toddler when you have a newborn baby like I did, you'll find this a little bit challenging. Everything that I read before the baby arrived was like, you know, your toddler or your older child will help you change nappies and bring you wipes, and it will be all this lovely sort of interaction. It wasn't that easy for me. James couldn't be less interested in finding nappies and holding wipes. All he wanted to do was pull all the wipes out of the package and just wasn't interested. I'd say to him, go and get mummy the nappy so mummy can change baby's nappy with you. And he just wasn't interested. He wouldn't even go and get it. Now that he's a bit older, he understands it, and he tells me when she's done a poopy, because he can smell it now. So he'll say, mummy, baby sister poopy. When he was younger, that kind of getting him to help me with the baby was a little bit of a fail, but it's worth trying, and it's paid off, because if I hadn't done that when he didn't show any interest, he wouldn't be showing interest in it now. So it might not benefit you straight away, but it will benefit you later. Give your toddler some quiet time activities for all the time that you're going to be spending feeding and putting baby down for naps, and just simply having to hold a newborn baby and having to keep your toddler as quiet as possible. I'm saying toddler because I have a toddler, but if you don't have a toddler, this still applies. My son James loves coloring, and every time I was feeding baby, I would get his coloring books out and his crayons, and he could sit next to me, do some coloring. I could help him because I'd be right next to him, and I would actually limit the coloring to when I was feeding the baby so that he wasn't bored of it by the time I needed him to be quiet. Yeah, and that really helped us. And if your child is not interested in coloring, you could try other things. I am not opposed to screen time if you want to give them the iPad or put a cartoon on the telly for them to watch just to keep them a bit quieter, or give them some snacks sitting next to you. Just anything that will keep them quiet and make your life a bit easier when when you're trying to keep your baby asleep or feed the baby or something like that. My next tip is to try your best to understand your older child's emotions, and when they have a big tantrum or something that's out of character for them to do, try and understand that that's a reaction to one of a very few things. Either they're feeling frustrated because they can't do something with mummy or daddy, or they're lonely because mummy is spending too much time with baby, or they are bored in the house because he's been in the house for too long. So try and understand their emotions and see the reaction as something that they're trying to show you, and his way of dealing with his emotions. And I think the parent's job in that moment is to get your child to understand their own emotions by talking to your child about the emotion and saying, are you feeling frustrated? And if they're really young, like James, they won't be able to reply and say, yes, I'm feeling frustrated. But you can say, you are feeling frustrated, and it's not okay to throw your toys on the floor and break them. And when you're frustrated, you can stamp your feet. And so you can do it with them, and they can understand that when they feel like that, they can stamp their feet, and it's something less damaging than breaking toys or throwing things or screaming. So it's about sort of getting them to understand their emotions and coming up with an alternative for them to do instead of what they chose to do with that emotion. Next tip is to let them know that you're coming back. Sometimes you have to go in another room to put the baby for a nap or feed or do whatever, and a lot of the times you spend a chunk of your day doing that. And I found that what really helped James was to tell him that I was coming back. So whenever I had to leave to put Isabella down for a nap or something, I'd always tell James, say, Mummy is going to put baby sister for a nap, and when we come back we're going to do some colouring, or when we come back we're going to have some snacks. So he wouldn't necessarily know the amount of time that I'd be upstairs for, but he'd know what I was doing and what was going to happen when I came back. And that gave him a bit more of like, right, Mummy is not just going and I don't know when she's coming back. She's coming back because when she comes back we're having a snack. And I think that really helps, and it's something simple and quite easy to do. Again, just try not to get too disheartened if they don't understand it or if they don't pay attention. Just remember, everything is going in their brains and in their mind, but they're not necessarily reacting to it straight away. And my last tip for the newborn days is just to make a big deal when you see your older child, because they like to be greeted and they like to be seen as important, and even though they don't understand it, they probably like to be missed. And so whenever James was out at the park with his grandparents or with his dad, whenever he got home, I used to make such a big deal and say, "You're home, I've missed you," and give him a cuddle and a kiss, and he would love that. And to this day, he expects that reaction whenever he's at the front door. He just looks at me waiting for me to react like a big deal, like I really missed him. And I used to always make a point of putting Isabella down somewhere safely to greet him without holding her. It was that little moment, it was just about him. And now let's get on with some tips for after the newborn days and things that have helped me and are still helping me to this day. So my first tip is to get dressed first thing in the morning. Yourself and your kids as well, because if you need to do a school run, nursery drop off, if you need to go into a shop or need to take the baby to be weighed in the clinic, whatever it is, you'll all be ready and you won't be rushing to get everybody ready. So what I like to do is to get us all ready and also get my changing bag ready, so it's all packed and ready to go. And when it's time to go out of the door, all we need to do is put shoes on, grab coats, whatever, and go. I don't need to faff around trying to get everybody dressed and be late. My second tip is to set a goal for the day. What are you going to be doing primarily that day? Are you going to do some work? Are you going to do some housework? Are you going to relax? What do you need to do the most that day? And once you set that goal, when you do have a chance where both children are happy, either one is napping and the other is playing on their own, or both of them are napping, or whatever it is, when you have 5 minutes where you can be child-free in the house, you know what you're going to do. For example, today is my filming day and I'm filming this video for you guys. Isabella's upstairs asleep, James is watching some Peppa Pig and having some snacks, and I'm in here filming. And that was my goal for the day, was to get some work done. I would have loved for today to be a relaxing day because Isabella woke up at 4:30 in the morning today. So if I didn't have work to do today, I would probably be sitting on the sofa with a cup of tea. Merge their routines. Now, when the second child is still a newborn, it's very hard. They're on different schedules. They don't do things at the same time. But after the newborn days, things start to settle a bit more, and you can try and get both of them on the same bedtime, same meal times, because that will make everything feel a lot more organized and you won't feel like you're constantly doing something for one or the other. If you have both of them doing things at the same time, then you're bound to have a bit more gaps in the day where you can fit other things in, and that's helped us loads. We managed to get Isabella and James at the same bedtime. It's made a massive difference, and that's something you can start to implement as soon as possible when you feel like your newborn baby is starting to grow out of that crazy newborn days where nothing makes sense and nothing follows a pattern, and get both your children into the same routine. The next tip is to show some affection to set the example, and that's something that I found really difficult. In the first few days of having a newborn, I felt like whenever I was showing affection to Isabella, giving her a cuddle or a kiss in front of James, that James would feel jealous and that I couldn't do that in front of him because it wasn't fair, and if I did, I'd have to give him a kiss as well. And I just felt really guilty whenever I was showing her any kind of affection in front of him. So I used to wait until he wasn't in the room to kind of be really cuddly with her, and I wish I hadn't done that, but I guess that was my way of understanding the dynamics of our family. But what I do nowadays is I do that to set an example. So I feel like James is very affectionate with her because I changed the way that I was doing things. And if I'm affectionate with her in front of him, it makes him want to do the same and be affectionate with her. Obviously, don't rub it in their faces if they're crying or if they're upset for whatever reason. Don't cuddle the baby at that point because it would just make them feel a bit bad, and I can understand why. So yeah, I think as a general rule, it just makes them feel more like they know what to do because that's what mummy's doing. My next tip is to let them interact and get to know each other without you constantly interfering. And that's for more when they're a bit older, when the baby is able to sit up and crawl and play together. I used to just sit there and watch James and watch Isabella like a hawk to make sure none of them was getting hurt. He was being gentle with her and that she wasn't scratching him with her nails. Instead of mediating, I was interfering, and I was stopping James from being confident around her and being able to play with her and help her, and not thinking that, you know, mummy doesn't trust me because she's here all the time, and whenever she leaves the room she peeks through the door to make sure that I'm still being a good boy. And so I kind of phase that out a little bit more, and I'm a lot more relaxed now. Obviously I don't let them hurt each other badly, but you know, if James is trying to stroke her head and he's a little bit sort of rougher than I'd want him to be, I still let him do it, and I just say, oh, good boy, James, well done, you know, next time do it gently. And that way he learns that, you know, what he did wasn't wrong because mummy didn't stop me, but I could do it better next time. And Isabella also learns that, you know, you've got to be careful around Big Brother because he's got heavy hands. I think the second child is just hard as rock in any case because it has to put up with so much from the older child. But yeah, I kind of stopped interfering, and now I'm just a mediator. I stay nearby to make sure that everything is okay, but I'm not there breathing down their neck all the time. And I think that's made a big difference in how they're so happy with each other playing together now, because you know, it's their own private moment of playing. I don't necessarily need to be sitting on the floor right next to them. I could be sitting a bit further further away or on the sofa and still watching them. My last tip is to set a diffusing moment. And that just means that when everything is chaos, when things are completely out of control, both children are crying, toys everywhere, the house is a mess, you've got greasy hair, the dishes are piling up, and it's just too chaotic for you, summon your diffusing moment. In our family, our diffusing moment is a big family hug. So whenever things are just out of control, we say, right, let's have a big family hug. And we get everybody together, give them all a cuddle and a tickle. There's a bit of laughter, there might be a bit of tears, but it's just that diffusing moment that resets their system and brings everybody together and makes them all feel warm and accepted and happy. And things might go back to being chaotic after that, but most of the time for us, it really helps to diffuse the situation and makes everything a little bit more manageable. So these are my tips for going from 1 to 2 kids and how to introduce a sibling and how to deal with life with 2 kids. And I hope this was helpful to some of you. If you have friends who are currently pregnant or who's just had a baby and you think they might find this video useful, make sure you share this video with them. And if you're not already subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. It would mean the world to me. And if you have anything to add, any other tips, things that helped you, leave it on the comments below. I always find it really helpful reading your comments and doing things that you guys recommend. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, and I hope to see you guys soon in my next video. Bye!